So you're probably wondering why there's a baby head mask behind me. We'll get to that. Today I'm excited for two really important and awesome reasons. Number one, I get to do an interview at Moz, one of my favorite companies in the whole world, and this is not a paid post, I'm not nearly that cool. Number two, it's Halloween, which is by far my favorite holiday, except for St. Patty's Day. That holiday is really cool too. So I'm dressing up as a skydiver to the interview, but not just a skydiver. Why be a skydiver when you could be a creepy baby skydiver? Okay, so you've got the invite, you've gone to the location. Now what are the best things to do when you're actually doing the interview? Well, the first one is, for the love of God, tell stories. Don't list facts or little stupid anecdotes. Tell stories. Stories are infinitely more interesting than anything else you could possibly do. So focus on stories. That's what you want to be talking about.
Yeah, there's a lot of context that I think is important to this. So to start out, if you rewind about 5 or 6 years at this point, I was going through a really tough part of my life. I was dealing with clinical depression, and I was looking for some kind of way to climb out of that. I didn't want to just go straight to pills. I wanted to find a more natural way to do that. So what I started doing was talking to friends and people I respected. A lot of them actually worked at Moz.
Number two, interviewing is an artful skill. Just like painting, for example, where it takes years to get really, really good at interviewing. As a result, because of the difficulty of this, most people who are going to interview you are going to be people who have not yet had the time to gain the experience of how to do interviews very well. So as a result of that, they're going to ask you what turns out to be very generic questions. Probably what they're going to do is they're going to write the questions 24 hours before, 48 hours before the interview, and they're going to pick things that just come to mind. So for my life list things, that's things like, when did you start the list? How do you pay for it? All these kind of generic questions I get all the time. You're going to run into exactly the same problem. So your mission then is to combat this and make an interesting interview, because that'll help both you and the interviewer. So when someone asks you a generic question, what you need to do is work really, really hard, maybe even harder than the interviewer, to come up with creative answers and unique and new answers to their very generic questions.
What excites me the most is that there are very intelligent and reasonable people who are predicting that AI is going to be as big to mankind as electricity was. And that's going to happen in our lifetime.
Number three, the other thing you're going to want to do is not as obvious. You're going to want to mention lots of other people. Now, this is going to sound strange because this should be an interview about you, right? Well, it turns out in order for you to become interesting enough to be interviewed, you must have stood on the shoulders of other people at one point or another. There's lots of other people in your life who I'm sure helped you out in one way or another. So it is only appropriate and also beneficial to you to mention lots of other people. If you mention them during interviews, they're much more likely to want to promote you or that interview down the road. But more than, say, the marketing tactical reason like that, it's just a good thing to do. So go way out of your way to mention other people. People like Tim Ferriss taught me this, where he does this all the time. He mentions lots and lots of people. Casey Neistat does this. Now, after I've learned this tip from them, I've tried to do as much as I possibly can.
I like this question. Good job, Megan. Megan's singing with my girlfriend. That's why this is coming up. So Adam Felting, who works here still. Sarah Bird, she had, Rand had some. Jen Lopez, so check that. What's Dr. Pete up to? Getting Things Done. It's a book by David Allen.
The next one is, if you give a dumb answer or something that doesn't make any sense, and I do this all the time, ask follow-up questions to the interviewer. Try to turn it on them a little bit. I tried doing this and it works really, really well. If you sound like an idiot during your own interview, that is your own fault, not the fault of the interviewer. So it is up to you to push them to make sure they push you to have better answers. So ask lots of follow-up questions.
Well, I guess I don't really understand the question. So someone comes up to me and says,
well, so you're living your life like this right now. Your income is impacted. So theoretically, you'll not
come up with your message and, more importantly, your story before the interview. Now, I fought this one for a really long time at the beginning, and this was because I didn't want to sound overly rehearsed, or I wanted to make sure that I sounded original. The problem with this is that when you try to make things up and you just come up with your ideas during the interview, they're probably not going to be very good. That's certainly the case for me. That may very well and probably will be the case for you too. Instead, what a better idea to do is come up with talking points beforehand, sentences and sound bites that you're going to say during the interview. I got this from a lot of people. So if you see any guest on a talk show, what they do is a pre-interview with the host so they can pick out what stories and what anecdotes are funny first so they know what to talk about when they're doing the interview, so they rehearse it. Same thing with politicians and people you see on TV all the time. The reason they're so good at doing interviews is because they do them all the time, which means they're rehearsing all the time. So before you have your next big media interview or interview of any kind, you're going to want to make sure that you figure out what your talking points are first.
My personal life is actually, at least to me, much more interesting. So in that area, I'm a college dropout. I've been to every state, to every continent, to about 100 countries, run a marathon, and I have a lifetime ban from budget rent-a-car and the country of Singapore. So we'll go a little bit more into that stuff. But
finally, my remaining tip is during your interviews, regardless if it's just your voice or if you're on TV or if you're on a podcast or whatever it is, smile. People can hear you smiling, even if they can't see you. It takes a little bit of effort, but makes a huge difference. Just smile. It's going to help make things seem a little bit more natural. It's going to make you come off a lot more friendly. And hopefully you'll also have a really good time.